For more on China's space program, Keith Crowing now joins me from outside Washington. He's a former rocket scientist and the editor of spaceref.com. Thanks very much, Keith, for joining us. Few accomplishments for a nation have the ability to stir national pride as achievements in space. And China's space station is up and functioning, and today the country's first spacewalk by a woman. How significant is this?
Well, I can remember, this is quite some time ago, when the first American spacewalk happened, just after the first Russian spacewalk happened, when there was a lot of national pride there. And I remember when the first American woman went into outside the space shuttle, did a spacewalk. So it's important, and I think everybody should be congratulated for getting a program to get this far this fast.
Yeah, and another issue which may not be getting as much attention is the two taking part in the EVA, or spacewalk, are wearing suits designed and built by China. And it really does show how rapidly China's space technology is advancing.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, there's a couple ways to build a spacesuit, but that doesn't mean that there's only one way to build a spacesuit. And the more approaches that we have to building them, the better everybody will be.
Now, NASA and China, somewhat famously, do not work together. There is a U.S. federal law barring any such cooperation. While it may be a popular measure by conservative lawmakers here in the U.S., I've had several NASA employees and some former employees at the highest level wishing that would change. Will it, and what are your thoughts on this?
I would change it. And of course, I worked on the space station 20 years ago, and when we brought the Russians in, they said, oh my God, the Russians. Here we are 20 years later, and other than minor little, arguments, we get along far better in orbit, in outer space, with the Russians than we do on Earth. So I would posit that perhaps we should learn something for how we do things in space and then maybe apply it back on Earth. And, the more that you cooperate in space, the more you assure peaceful, intentions up there. And it's going to get crowded soon. There's commercial space stations coming in. There's the Star Lab, there's the Axiom, there's the Orbital Reef. So, everybody's going to have to figure out how to get this all working together in a cohesive fashion.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, about how crowded it is getting. It's still pretty wide open, but China's space station is obviously much newer than the International Space Station. What will it be used for, and will China work with other nations? How significant do you think this is now?
Well, China already is. It's working with people who are experimenting as we speak on the International Space Station. And again, I worked on the original, the USS design. Looking at the pictures, I can see that many of the standard interfaces, like how you plug something into a wall or so forth, have been replicated so that it's, China's been very smart in this regard, and that they can take experiments that have been designed for the International Space Station and also fly it in theirs, and vice versa. So the boundaries here are not, there's no rocket science involved in the boundaries between China's program and the International Space Station. It's all political.
Let's talk just a bit about how rapidly China has ramped up. Do you think they have leapfrogged Russia, and where do you see them going in the next 10, 20, 30 years?
I don't think anybody's leapfrogging anybody else anymore. There's so much involvement globally, not just the U.S., Russia, Europe, and China, but many other nations now. And I think it's more of a, people ask me, is there a space race? Well, you have to be in a race. You have to say, yeah, I'm in a race to have a race. But I think more what you have now is sort of a very helpful sort of collaboration, where everybody brings something to the game and it improves it for everybody else. So if there's leapfrogging, everybody's leapfrogging over everybody else simultaneously.
That's a good way to phrase it. I also find it kind of interesting, and maybe a somewhat sad commentary, that sending billionaires into space for a matter of minutes is garnering so much worldwide attention. But a new space station and China's significance, the fact that they're growing so rapidly, is getting very little coverage here in the United States. Are we at the point where space is mundane to many people?
Well, those of us in the space world would almost hope that space becomes routine, and in many ways it has. And as far as the billionaires thing in space, I mean, there's a precedent on Earth. I mean, just air travel started with rich people drinking champagne, and then now we complain about not having enough leg room. And of course, I really got to ask, how many billionaires have flown? How many of them have big yachts? I mean, where's the outrage over the yachts? We don't see it. So I think it's you and us in the news media to some extent that maybe pick the wrong things to be emphasizing. I really do think that the peaceful use of space, as China is showing it's doing with its space station, with the International Space Station, is something we really ought to be focusing more on, in my opinion.
Great. Keith, well said. Keith Crowing, he is a former rocket scientist and editor of spaceref.com. Thanks so much for joining us and putting this in perspective.
My pleasure.